Hello, in this episode we look at the DNA of Longlegs, what films inspired it, what characters came before it, and what films you can watch after you've seen Longlegs for yourself. Assuming you survived, of course. Hello and welcome to another episode of Mondo Street Presents. Tonight we're going to be looking at the DNA of Longlegs, or as Dan calls it. What do you call it, mate?
Slinky legs.
Which is, for a film of its what that film's about, Slinky Legs, is mildly inappropriate and a bizarre word association game.
That's how my mind works, my friend.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, all I can say is bless you, and I hope you recover well. Because I think if you were in a situation where you met Longlegs and called him Slinky Legs, I don't think it's going to end well for you.
No,
Yeah.
but I'd die laughing.
A dialogue, yeah. You've got slinky legs.
Oh, hi, Slinky legs.
Longlegs is a procedural, but with at the beginning a mild tinge of the macabre, going into full tilt hello Satan by the end of the film. So what we want to do tonight in this episode is look at the films that may have well inspired it, and then maybe make a couple of recommendations for films to people to watch after this. There will be spoilers. There may be blood, who knows. But I think one thing to start off with is, for me, there's a lot of marks in the social media saying that Longlegs was the best horror of the last decade. I don't think it's a horror film. I think it's like saying that Silence of the Lambs is a horror film, and I don't think that is either.
So would you describe it more as a psychological thriller?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I think that's where it sits for me. And I think that maybe there's always positive and negative press about films. You know, reviews are subjective, as we keep saying, and some of the press has been negative in the fact it wasn't that scary because somebody set it up as a horror film, and you go and see a horror film, you expect to go boo, and if you don't go boo, then you're going to say it's a crap horror film, aren't you?
Very true. Yeah, and it's interesting you sort of mentioned Silence of the Lambs there, because that was touted at the time as a horror.
Yeah.
But the only scary part of that was touted by everything was Hannibal Lecter, whose screen time in that film is not a lot.
Oh, it's got to be under 10 minutes, 10 to 15
Yeah,
minutes.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, I think maybe, I don't know, why do they do it? Because some people might find it horrific, but you say a horror film, you think The Omen, The Exorcist, Amityville Horror, or even for other generations, more recent films.
We're inclusive here.
We are inclusive.
We're Gen A to Gen Z.
Yeah, and we're not ageist at all. So one of the things that I did, I when I was doing the research on this, I thought, oh, has the director himself spoken about his inspirations and how do they align to what we see as inspirations in the film? So for those that don't know, the director was a gentleman called Osgood Perkins, and Osgood Perkins is the son of Anthony Perkins. Anthony Perkins was the actor that played Norman Bates in Psycho 1, 2, and 3.
1 and 2 I know for sure.
I'm not sure about 3.
Not sure about 3.
I'll say 3 question mark. Okay.
Is that the extended version?
That's the extended version, yeah. 3 question mark. His mum. So you've got all that being a child to a father who's one of the most famous horror actors, because Psycho was a horror film, or was it a psychological thriller?
See, I think it was both.
Yeah. Either way, so you've got all that, and the way his dad passed away was traumatic, and his mum died. His mum was an actress. She died at 9/11. So when he's interviewed, Osgood Perkins talks about Longlegs being kind of like an amalgam of his childhood. Yeah. Not being visited by a strange Nicolas Cage, but there are elements of his childhood in there. So he has said quite openly that his biggest influence to Longlegs, to the look, the feel, the sound of Longlegs, was Silence of the Lambs.
Interesting.
Yeah, he said that openly. He said he wasn't trying to do a remake of Silence of the Lambs, but Silence of the Lambs was on the, you know, the fact sheet. When you think about your performance in this film, think about Silence of the Lambs, and for me, that is the biggest single inspiration for this film. He also talks about Seven. What else? He talks about a film that I hadn't seen, A Woman Under the Influence from 1974.
No, not seen, heard.
It's I've had a quick peeky boo at it, and it's about mental disintegration, similar to Joker.
Okay.
He also mentions My Own Private Idaho.
Oh God.
Yeah. Purely because there's a scene in Longlegs where there's a bus stop included, and there's a bus stop in My Own Private Idaho, and that inspired that day of shooting. So he's obviously got a great knowledge, and the white face makeup that Longlegs has on was inspired by, I didn't even know this film existed, Ronaldo and Clara from 1978, which was a Bob Dylan documentary.
God.
Yeah. Which included I don't know what's the which included him creating characters on the spot, and he covered himself in white face paint. So that's where that came from. So straight off, what was, you know, if we look at the opening of the film, what was the first film that grabbed your attention, that made you go, oh?
Things that made me go, ooh.
You know, is there anything as the film opens, or anything that you saw?
The opening shots, the moment you get past the production houses that are involved, and
47 seconds.
And the way it was presented with the frame,
yeah,
and the sound, and even to a point the movement, just reminded me of the opening sequence of Insidious, which to this day is a horror film.
Oh, totally.
That has stuck with me.
Yeah.
Because it's so messed up. But that opening sequence alone, I didn't know anything about Insidious, and I'm presented with that. I'm like, I don't like this. Yeah, I want to get out. I want to get out. So when I saw that as a Slinky, I've done it again.
When you saw
Longlegs, I sat there and I thought, oh, here we go. We're in for another rough ride. Daniel, sit yourself down.
It's funny because the style of the film, I get what you mean about the opening is Insidious like, but it just goes straight away. It just maybe there was some talk about the importance of squares and circles. I don't know why I'm drawing them out. I'm sure you know what they are. Of squares and circles, that squares showed the control when things were in order, and that circles showed the passage of time. So if you look through the film, there are lots of squares and circles in it.
I have read about this one,
yeah. So that was quite interesting. Personally, I thought it was a little bit too nerdy. I just wanted to be entertained.
But the other part of an opening sequence like that, where it's shot in a 4:3, it's also for a modern audience. What 4:3?
Yeah.
It's a little it's a little quick math there, Philip. Well done.
Thank you. Well done.
But it's slightly jarring because it represents a time of past. Like I saw the meme go out on social media that someone emailed their professor at university and said, "Can I please use a fact that I found from the 1900s? I found it in 1994." And you're like, "Oh my god, the late 1900s was like." So you know, there is that disassociation because it's not something that's used to. So I think it presents itself as already a jarring feature. Okay, we're in times yonder past.
It's quite clever because Perkins, as he goes through the film, I don't like saying this word because most of the time I say it wrong, but there's the juxtaposition between that 4:3, which is very tight, that the only thing that exists in the film is what's in that reduced frame. But then later, as the film goes on, he is using a lot of very, very wide shots. And
But
those,
that shows a very skilled filmmaker,
oh,
because in a
totally.
4:3 ratio, you've got to
Yeah.
fit a lot of information
Yeah.
in a very small square.
Yeah.
Whereas then when you open the visual palette, shall we say,
Palette here, yes.
the visual palette, is that you've got more space to play with, and you've got more freedom, and you've got more air, so you can create presence with that. But in a 4:3, you've got a very small space to film a lot of information.
I think
and that's why I think that opening scene was good, because it was from far away. So although it's a 4:3 ratio, you're getting a lot of information.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Yeah,
I thought it was very well used.
And it's reused again and again and again throughout the film. But the use of the very wide shot, I found quite unsettling, because you know that the character is in a, an area of potential danger, or you're waiting for something to go boo, and having these really long wide shots, you're actually looking past the character. You're looking around all the time, going,
but that's why it puts you off guard.
Yeah.
It puts you on guard, because you know something's going to happen.
Yeah.
That speaking like that reminds me of what was the one on Netflix? Was it The Haunting of Hill House?
Yes. Yeah, there's elements of that there. Yeah.
It reminds me of that. You were always looking for something to happen, and you never fully focused on the center frame, because you knew stuff was going on that you needed to focus on.
Yeah.
And that puts you in a very awkward position, because you're on guard all the time.
Yeah.
And anyone who suffers from anxiety will know, when you're on guard all the time, it's exhausting.
Yeah. That's the beauty of this film. This film, that from beginning to end, you feel as though there's something not quite right all the way through it. And obviously there's a lot not right all the way through it, but it never lets you settle into a regular pattern. There's always an angle wrong, or the light's a bit wrong, or even the main character, Maika Monroe, who plays Agent Harker, her speech pattern. Her speech pattern is very, I've heard people refer to it as autistic, but I don't think it's that. I think it's more robotic, very flat answers. And the way that they play other characters off her is to show you just how not normal the way she communicates is.
I have also read that she is meant to depict an autistic character.
Right. Okay.
So but again, that may be just filtered through.
Yeah, I think that's an easy. I think that's too simple a reading of her character, because as we find out at the end of the film, there is a reason why she's like that. I'm not going to give more spoilers than I have to, but yeah.
But that's the beauty of neurodiversity, is that someone watching that as a neurotypical will immediately say, "Oh, they're autistic," because they're not filtering the same way. But someone that understands neurodiversity, it could mean that they have a different look at things, and they approach things in a very different way, which could be seen as actually quite an intelligent way to look at things.
Okay. So the second film which jumped out to me was Seven. How can you, since 1995, how can you make a procedural with a serial killer in it that doesn't reference Seven in some way or another?
I know we sort of had a little chat before recording.
Yeah.
And it made me think, when we were discussing it, are we now starting to see a generation of films inspired by Seven?
Yeah.
Because there would have been directors growing up at that time who maybe that was one of the first things they saw.
Shit, there will be directors working today who were born after Seven was released.
Because late review watched The Batman the other night, as you
late review
texting you throughout going, "Oh my god." But that film it's Seven with a Cape Crusader. So I'm wondering if if we're starting to see that filter through more now because of its influence at that time. And those that are making films now
Mm.
are able to reflect that. Same with
Yeah.
Silence of the Lambs. I mean, that at the time was a huge film, but now it's
Mm.
probably like one of those films that you go back and go, "This was a cult film at the time. You've really got to see this."
Well, the director's actually come out and said that there was a direct influence from Seven, because the scene where, spoiler, Longlegs gives himself up to the police.
Detective.
It's not quite that, but it is that. It's that whole thing of maintaining control while seeming to surrender.
I've just got Nicolas Cage doing that in the most Nicolas Cage way.
Yeah.
Detective.
Yeah, but the thing is though that as much as you think you know Nicolas Cage and you've seen his performances, from my eyes, the bees and Face Off and God,
Took his face
the Kiss of the
right
Vampire,
off.
all those, it's nothing compared to what he does in Long Legs. It's absolutely nothing.
But hasn't he come out and said he can't make another horror film now?
Well, he said that this is the
Or was that
first
taken out of context?
No, he said that this is the first and only time he'll play a serial killer. Now, I would kind of like take a little bit of exception to that comment, because isn't a serial killer somebody that has killed 4 or more people?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the argument's got to be around Castor Troy from Face Off, because he was a prolific murderer and a nutbag. So yeah, but he said he'll never play a serial killer again. Because after portraying Longlegs, where do you go?
But he's had a quite nice little run of horror with like Mandy and things like that.
Oh
He's
yeah,
had a little run of it. So
yeah, yeah.
and I
But
must
not
say,
repeating that though. Not trying to repeat the success of the character of Longlegs will mostly keep him going in a nice little run of horror. Because if you didn't know it was Nicolas Cage, you might get away with it. Which reminds me of the second part of Seven. The marketing campaign for Longlegs made no mention that Nick Cage was in the film. And if we look at Seven, that made no mention that Kevin Spacey was John Doe.
very
So
good.
you've got those mirrors there. So, at least Perkins is holding his hands up to his, to his inspirations. Another David Fincher film was Zodiac. That
Yeah, you said this.
again, I saw that as an inspiration, and it's come out as an inspiration. So he's very honest. This guy, you've got to give him his credit. The ciphers that are throughout the film that Longlegs sends out have poor grammar in them, which matches the Zodiac killer. And the cipher looks suspiciously similar as well. Suspiciously similar.
A homage.
Homage. I'd then look at Michael Mann's Manhunter, which is the first film based on Thomas Harris's Red Dragon. So it's like a prequel to Silence of the Lambs. Because Harker in Longlegs has this intuition. Will Graham in Manhunter has an intuition. And my final reference film, and I know you don't like it, okay, is Hereditary, for that total feeling of unease all the way through it. You can't watch Hereditary and say you were comfortable watching it. It's like you can't watch Longlegs and say you were comfortable watching it. You can watch some horror films and just go, it's a jump scare, it's a jump scare, it's a jump scare every 13 minutes, but not those films.
I did like Hereditary. Let's just leave that there.
So are there any films that I've missed that you thought?
I would like to, it just dawned on me now. I'd like to take you back. Come with me on a journey, if you will. The intuition thing is a very interesting point, because if you look at the canon of Mr. King, Stephen,
yes,
The Shining,
yes,
doth appear throughout a number of his books as an intuition.
It does, yes.
Yeah, and I would like to draw the witness, if I may, to
The Shining.
To The Shining.
Yeah.
There were some shots there. There were some shots there that are very, as I've said to you before, oh, there's the axe, oh, there's the snow. You're kind of homaging that.
Yeah.
And even some of the style of those shots is very reminiscent of Kubrick's The Shining.
Yeah.
But to take away from that, I do think the intuition thing again does refer to The Shining and Stephen King's whole canon are
Yeah,
based around that, where all his
and
characters have a shining of some sort.
yeah, and I think the way that the intuition actually pays off or plays off at the end of the film, I think it could be seen as the bad side of The Shining, which is the Overlook Hotel. The evil presence is seeing Danny, particularly in Doctor Sleep. It's trying to draw him in because of his shining. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'll give you that one. I hadn't really thought of it because I think yeah, he's another one of those directors, isn't it? That it must be virtually impossible to make a horror stroke psychological thriller without having some kind of Kubrick reference in there.
Yeah, well, I don't just think Kubrick. I think all the films that you've mentioned, we've been discussing, fall into that because they stylized horror and psychological thriller through cinema, through the even the late 80s, the 90s, the early noughties. There was a definite theme to them, and I think we're seeing that play out now.
Yeah,
because those directors, writers, etc., of an age that was what their first bit of that style of cinema would have been, or even a little bit later, and they're like, oh, 10 years since that film, they go, oh, you've got to go and see this, you've got to see this.
yeah.
And they just absorb it like a sponge. It's great that he's being very open about the influences and about how he's visualizing that, but for some directors it probably shines through, no pun intended, but it comes through as a subliminal, and it's just because that works so well. And it's a, I'm going to use the word again, it's a bit of a trope. It is to a point, and a homage, but there's nothing wrong with that because it makes for great cinema.
Yeah, I suppose we're at the stage now where you've got Fincher as a generation beyond, and Fincher would have referenced Jaws, which is about the same gap between Jaws and Seven, Fight Club. You know, the releases that you've got to Seven, Sounds of the Lambs, and this film. Yeah, so that's an excellent point. Anything else that stood out for you in tone, where you thought, ooh, that might have come from somewhere? You mentioned one before.
Oh, my mind's going blank.
And they've just made a prequel to it. Or a sequel. I'm so disinterested. I didn't know. Rosemary's Baby.
Oh God, yes. No, they have. They've made a prequel.
Yeah.
How do you make a prequel to Rosemary's Baby?
Have you seen the tagline?
Oh
Rosemary
God,
wasn't the only one.
yes, I had. Oh, I can hear that in voiceover band.
Yeah.
Rosemary wasn't the only one.
But I'll give you Rosemary's Baby because there is a massive theme running through Rosemary's Baby around devil worship, because that's what the inhabitants of that apartment block are. They are devil worshippers, and ultimately that is, I might get called out for this, but ultimately that's what Longlegs is. You know, Longlegs is what do they call them in what was Robert Duvall's character in The Godfather? The Italians have a word for it, consigliere. That's it. So Longlegs is the devil's consigliere on Earth.
I'd like to say to the dear listener, Phil has decided to go fancy this evening.
Because he's not necessarily the instrument of death, but he is the harbinger of death. That sounds a bit twatty, doesn't it? It really does. But that's what it is, because he's not.
I am the chalice of death.
Yeah, he's not doing the killings, is he? Put it that way. So Rosemary's Baby, and there's also another one which just sprang to mind, which has got a lot of devil worship in it. There's two. There's a really, really, really old film called The Devil's Reign with William Shatner. I'm thinking maybe 72, 73, somewhere around about there. And then obviously The Ninth Configuration with Johnny Depp.
Oh my good Lord.
But I cannot imagine that either of those films were.
I don't think there'd be
part of his inspirational catalogue.
I wouldn't see there being a homage to Shatner in a devil film,
No.
and Johnny Depp in The Ninth Gate. Dear Lord, straight to DVD.
But how would Shatner say long legs?
Long legs.
Oh my God, he's mated with Christopher Walken, has he?
I was going to say it's the Christopher Walken delivery. Ladies and
my
gentlemen, long legs.
Yeah. So they're what we see as the main inspirations then. I think if you're rewatching Longlegs on the wide shots, I think I don't know how many times I counted it, but the devil is almost always presented in the shot.
Ooh.
Okay, so
I now need to go and look.
In a dark corner somewhere, that he's always there. One of the biggest takeaways from me is excellent use of T-Rex. Great use of T-Rex. But the rest of the sound design of the film was sheer genius. The amount of silence was perfect, which sounds really weird when you're talking about sound design.
No,
soundtrack.
it's a huge part of sound design.
It's a huge, and they've used silence properly. Yeah, they're not sledgehammering you with it. It's used properly. What else would I take away from it? Well, I think finally I'd take away from it that I personally think that this is Cage's best performance. It is. I said on our shorter review of the film, how do you out Cage Nicolas Cage? Well, you get him to play Longlegs, and he puts all of these characters he's played, from Castor Troy to Stanley Goodspeed to Kiss of the Vampire, Leaving Las Vegas, into one character. And on the rewatch, think about all those characters boiling away in this big crock pot, and then watch the bit when he's driving in the car. Mummy, Daddy! You think to yourself, okay, that's enough of that now. But I think, I just think Cage was absolutely brilliant in it. I think if I'd been acting opposite him, I think I would have had a coronary.
you see, I am a really big fan of the unbearable lightness of being. Yeah, that was what it's called, wasn't it?
The unbearable lightness.
It wasn't the
unbearable weight of massive importance. The unbearable light of being.
That's something complete. That's a novel. Anyway, but yeah, I thought that Cage film was Cage being Cage.
Yeah.
I could watch that endlessly because it was just brilliant.
Yeah,
have you not seen Paddington
Cage
2?
Being Cage, yeah. The unbearable weight of massive talent.
That's it.
I get Cage being Cage, but this is where
Cage acting. Yeah.
This is where you can't necessarily see it's Nicolas Cage. Yeah. The Longlegs makeup makes him look like some kind of mixture between. I'm trying to think of Mickey Rourke and Michael Jackson.
Melty face, pale face.
Well, the pale face is from the Bob Dylan film, but it's all about ex-glam rocker Too Much plastic surgery.
I was going to say 80s glam rocker that was trying to be down with the Cage in a club and just shouldn't be.
Yeah. It is fantastic. So, films that we would suggest that you watch after you've enjoyed and survived Longlegs are all of the films we've mentioned above. Okay, so Seven, Silence of the Lambs, Zodiac, Manhunter, Hereditary, The Shining, Rosemary's Baby.
Don't bother with Hereditary.
Insidious, shut it you, it's a masterpiece. And then, a couple of films that we personally haven't seen, but the director referenced, A Woman Under the Influence, Ronaldo and Clara. And I would also like to add in a couple which I think are potential influences to the film, but definitely worth watching. Oddity, which came out this year. Relatively small budget. Deeply, deeply scary in parts. Yeah. Yeah, I'd add that to it. There's a Korean film called Cure from '97.
Know that one? Yes, I
Yeah.
do know that. Yeah.
Fallen from 1998 with Denzel Washington.
Oh my goodness! Okay.
Yeah, he witnesses the
Yeah.
execution of a serial killer, but the serial killer says he'll be back, and he goes around possessing souls. And then finally, from the director of Parasite, Bong Joon-ho, is Memories of Murder, which is another procedural serial killer. It all turns to shit in the end. So that's our DNA of Longlegs. Bloody hell! It's amazing that the film got made.
But we're glad it did.
Yeah. Oh, we forgot the X-Files as well.
Oh God, yes. I've read many reviews saying that the X-Files was quite a big influence.
I think personally, and I might get called out for this one, the Dana Scully character is very obviously Clarice Starling. So, you've got the X-Files influenced by Silence of the Lambs, so therefore do you need to include the X-Files?
I would say yes, but now the bob haircut has made complete sense.
Yeah. Did you not get that at the time?
No.
Oh, yeah.
Late review again. Daniel's late reviews.
The only way that it wasn't a direct, homage to Starling was the fact that they made Dana Scully a scientist or a doctor to some degree, a medical degree.
It's almost like this could be a case for Mulder and Scully.
Scully, oh my God, I hated Catatonia.
That's another modern reference to the pop group, indie group, Catatonia from Wales.
I didn't hate them. Sorry, that's a really unkind thing to say. I went to see the Manic Street Preachers. I was excited to see the Manic Street Preachers, but I had to listen to 45 minutes Catatonia first. And
crowd rage.
Yeah, and I wasn't appreciating them because I wanted to see the Manics. So thank you to listening to our waffle about what we feel inspired Longlegs. Hopefully you agree. If you've got others to add,
put them in the comments on the Spotify channel. Thank you, listeners.
Yes, in wherever you watch or consume this, add a comment. As always, please like and subscribe. Can you see the marketing there? I'm learning to say it.
Like and subscribe.
If we were really good at this, I'd say just click on the button here.
Click the button somewhere here. Like and subscribe. You know you want to.
Hopefully you found this entertaining. We will continue to do DNAs of. But until that time, when we see you again, thank you and good night.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.